This is the Journey Podcast. We highlight the journeys of our guests, where they've been, where they are now, and where they are going. Let's join them on their journey. Welcome to the Journey Podcast. We are joined today by Dave Sobel of MSP Radio. And Dave's a really interesting guy and a guest I'm really excited about having on the journey today. He started as an MSP owner and some things before that as well, but we might not talk about that. We'll see where he lets us go in his journey today. He went into what we call the channel for those non-MSP people. He went and worked for a vendor who sold to managed service providers, a company that I run, including a really interesting time at SolarWinds, which is an interesting time that I want to explore with Dave a little bit. SolarWinds is a pretty well-known vendor in the space, but Dave is now the host of the Business of Tech Killing It podcast and is a renowned expert on the IT MSP business space. He holds multiple awards from the IT space, and he's also an avid Washington Nationals fan. And he hails from the United States capital of Washington, D.C. area. And I'm really glad. Thanks for joining us today, Dave. How you doing?
Oh, Nate, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this all week. I'm doing great and looking forward to talking. There's anything you want to ask, I'm totally open about it.
Well, let's just start with, what is MSP Radio? And maybe we need to back it up for the audience that doesn't know what MSP is, because we all live in our own little world over here, because we're special flowers, as you say. What is MSP Radio? What is it all about?
Sure. So MSP Radio is my company, right? So it's the company that I put together. That's the media company that's putting out podcasts and videos and online content. The Business of Tech is my flagship podcast. Killing It is its complement, where if Business of Tech is like Sports Center, then Killing It is like Pardon the Interruption. I also do some live streams for live events. I'm involved with, I actually work, MSP Radio helps with some of the advertising for some other MSP podcasts. Oh, what's an MSP? Well, an MSP are those IT companies that help serve generally small to mid-sized companies, but it can go all the way up to big enterprise and governments. Help them run their IT infrastructure, help them run their technology needs. And the idea behind managed services is it's a set of services that you will then manage on an ongoing basis and measure much more on results rather than time. So we call it an MSP because it's a nice shorthand for these providers that are trying to be more proactive about the way they help with technology. So MSP Radio is my media company where we're trying to act as a voice for solution providers, giving them advice and direction and news and commentary that they can use in their businesses.
So MSP Radio, though, from what I understand, is also helping other podcasters as well with some advertising solutions. And so you have as you call it, a network. So you have a different assortment of podcasts. So those all MSP related? Or are they all different kind of?
Yeah, generally focused on ones that are appealing to the MSP community.
Okay.
That's generally what we're doing. It's a broad definition intentionally. And I'll sort of say, like, the magic of my little company for me is kind of two bits. The first is I understand what MSPs, IT companies, solution providers want to hear and want to talk about. And I've spent 8 years on the vendor side, knowing how they want to message and how they want to measure their success. So I take that knowledge of what that need is and what will get MSP's attention, and I marry the two to get the attention and then also monetize it and help deliver messages. I always sort of quip and go, how many of us have sat on really bad webinars where you kind of figured out early that it's kind of 25 minutes of garbage with like a 3-minute ad at the end? Like, wouldn't you rather just hear good content and then you're okay with an ad in it? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with good messaging when it's tied with good content.
It's kind of like those continuing education things. Like, can I just get my point now and walk away and not have to wait to the end to get the form? You know?
Exactly. Right. But if it's good content, if you like listening, then it's a good, enjoyable experience. And I just sort of went back to basics a little bit and said, let's pair good content with relevant messaging.
So, and that kind of answered my next question, why you turned to being a content creator. And I was curious because you went from MSP to the channel to content creator, but I guess maybe that leads to a little bit different question. I'm going to say to most MSPs are horrible at creating content. Either they're not consistent, their content's really boring, those types of things. It's something that I saw an opportunity and I'm trying to change, and I'm not asking for a review from you today.
No,
But,
no.
but how did you make that shift? How did you become a content creator, and what was the pivot point for you in that?
It's funny. So I always sort of start with the why of your moves. And for me, I've made two major career choices for change. I mean, there's the third, of course. The first one, which I'm not talking about, was the decision to launch an MSP, right? So my first entrepreneurial endeavor. But actually, when I sold my MSP, I'm very pleased with the way that deal went. It paid out really well, but it was not like F you money, I'm done, right? It was I made some money and I put it in retirement. And in 30 years, I will be really happy that I did that, but I needed a job the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And I actively chose to not go be a consultant, like sell my little MSP and then go teach other people to be MSP. I don't want to do that. I want to learn more and I want to go be a vendor. And my challenge to myself was to be really good at that. I think I did it right. I helped Level Platforms. We sold it to AVG. I was at GFI. We became Logic Now. We sold that to SolarWinds very successfully. I stayed through the IPO. So I helped the company go public, stayed a year post. And it's like, and then I had the same. It was like, okay, that has ended. It is time to do something else. It was very clear to me that I wanted to go in a different direction. I didn't want to do the same thing again. I've done that first. I did MSP. I was good at it. I did a vendor. I was 2 vendors. I was good at it, but I want to try something else. And I went back to, well, what do I think I'm good at? What do I think my superpower was? And it was I think I'm pretty good at boiling down data and identifying trends and giving people directions. Well, how can I monetize that? And that was the move to do this was very intentional. I also spend a lot of time on my content thinking about how to make it tight and entertaining and educational all at the same time. Like I do a 5-minute daily podcast, right? And you would think, you're like, oh, 5 minutes, that must be easy. It's really hard. it's 3 hours of research and writing and tightening and editing and pulling it all together to get the best 5 minutes that I can get. Now that's a labor of love and I'm having so much fun doing it. But it's about I work at that to make it really easy. And a lot of people think good content just happens. It doesn't. It comes with intentionality. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the more you can refine that. And so it's kind of practice. And people always think it's got to be perfect on the launch. It's like, no, you just have to keep working at it.
Yeah, it's true. It's the same thing we've learned here. It's just go watch the earlier episodes and you'll see things have changed and advanced and those types of things.
Oh, totally. And I do the same thing. It's like my early episodes. It's like, oh, they're a little rougher. They're a little rougher. But you had to do that to get to where you're at. You have to practice. And it's not that I'm not proud of that work. That was the work that I needed to do to get better. And I just like the stuff I'm doing now better than that stuff, but that doesn't mean that wasn't valuable and it didn't help get me where I'm at to. So it's never perfect.
Well, one of the best episodes I think we've had, our number one downloaded episode to date, is Quentin Koblenz. He is an R&B producer, has worked with some of the biggest names in the R&B and rap industry, was a guest on The Journey. And I've known him since he was, a kid. We've grown up together. And I was mentioning on the podcast all of these earlier works. He's, please don't go look at those things, and we all knew him and sang them and everything. But he started there, and what he's doing today is simply amazing because he's got, a decade and a half of experience of professional work that most of the content creators don't have. And I just think that's incredible. We just get better and better at our craft, just like whether it's managing IT or managing people or things like that. If we continue to practice every day, it gets so much better. So a little bit back to you though, Dave, what is similar and what is maybe different about being an MSP and now just being a straight up content creator every day? What are you finding is the same? What are the same processes you could bring from that world? And what was completely different?
Yeah, so there's a lot that's the same. And I want to, because there's certain bits that I focus on that are certain important. I'm big on process. I remain big on process, right? And so anybody who's been an MSP knows how important thinking about things in a repeatable process is. That's still very important to me from a content creation perspective. In fact, I think a lot about making sure that whatever I'm doing is something that I can do multiple times over time for a long period. You'll note I don't tend to fling new shows out there or new, like I because I want to make sure that if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it for a while over time. I'm not afraid to abandon something that doesn't work. If I try it for a while and it's not getting traction, it doesn't work, that's okay. You abandon it and try something and move on to something else. But if it's successful, you need to be committing that you're going to be doing it. So I can't do 500 things all at once. I need to do things that I can do sustainable over time. That's should be very similar to any MSP, knowing you should not be bringing on something if you can't sustain it. Now, the other bit about it is that it is a business, right? You have to measure revenue and cost of goods sold, and you've got to remove your expenses, and it has to be profitable. And I committed to day one, when I said I was going to set out and do this wasn't a lark. It was, this is going to be a business, and I'm going to run it that way. I'm going to be tight about it, and I'm going to learn everything I ran from running an MSP and working with MSPs. It will be a business, and I focus on my numbers. I focus on the financial side of it. So I know where my revenue comes from. I know how I'm growing on it. I focus on my sales and marketing numbers. And you go like, well, you're a podcaster. No, I have sales and marketing numbers. Like I've got to get exposures, and I've got to grow, and I've got to watch the views and the subscribers and the engagement and the repeat. Like I've got to measure all of that to see what's working and what isn't. Well, that's all sales and marketing, everybody. And so it's that those systems are similar. Now, what's different is look, this is not an emergency response business. Right?
Yeah.
This is what I do now. There is very rarely a crisis in content. Maybe I'm responding to breaking news, right? Like maybe I want to move at a particular pace because something is timely, but that is very different from a crisis. And I'm very self-aware of the difference between what many MSPs and IT companies do that can legitimately be life and death versus what I do. And so I mean, I remember, I did a lot of healthcare when I was an MSP, and that is real, like patient care, ensuring that patients are being served. Well, that's serious stuff. That's different than what I do now.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a big difference what all the MSPs do out there. All right, so talk about the time in the vendor space. So we call in the MSPs the channel.
Yep.
You told us a little bit of what led you there, but what led you away? Why did you want to? I mean, I am assuming you had good money, good pension, good benefits. You get to hang up the phone and go away for on vacation. Why'd you want to go back and be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I did, because of course I did two vendors. It was the Level Platforms for almost 2 years, and I exited right after we sold it to ABG, and then I was with the GFI, Logic Now, then SolarWinds, and that was about 6 years. So I was about 8 years on the vendor side. The bit around it was so I'm definitely not a public company guy nor a big company guy. It was so much fun, and some of the highlights of my career were the GFI days and the rocket ship as we grew it and taking it through the sale. And I'm very glad for the education I got, and as the company got bigger and moved toward public, I learned so much. But I'm also, it's probably a character flaw of mine that I'm not great in big companies. I just can't do it right. I don't navigate the politics well enough. I don't necessarily, I just can't do it at the leadership level when you're talking about that many people. I'm really admire those that can, because it really opens up so many good doors for you. And so for me, it was very natural that it, like, okay, this has reached the point where I am not as effective as I like to be. It's time to do something else. And then the second bit was literally like sort of that personal decision of, well, do I do this again, or what's the next step? And I'm really proud of what we built, both at Level and what we built at the whole GFI to SolarWinds. Like, I'm really proud of those teams and the work that we accomplished. And in a way, I looked at it and I said, I don't think I could do better than that. I can't do another version that I would be more proud of. So why would I try? Now it's time to do something else. And that moment of, well, what's something else, led me down the path of, okay, I think I've identified something that makes me passionate, that I'm interested in, and where I think I can make a difference.
So yeah, I appreciate that story. I guess my only follow-up question would be are you able to talk a little bit about the difference between going from a privately held company to a public company?
Yeah.
What was the major change there for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's real rigor in a public company. There's size and process and discipline that comes with that. I mean, you've got an army of lawyers and accountants that are making sure that all that information is available to the public who want to invest in it. That's a very powerful thing, and that requires a certain level of messaging discipline, which I personally found difficult. Like, I just like talking, right? I'm a kind of guy, like, I get on webinars, or I lecture, or I teach. And when presentations need to be reviewed and have to be agreed upon, and there's a process, I can't do it. And by the way, that's a blame on me, not on the process. Like, that's a failing of me and my own style is I don't work that way very well. And so that's, for me, that was the major difference, because I do value what that rigor is trying to do for for transparency and discipline about people's money. I mean, that's people's money, right? Getting poured into a company, and you need to make sure that the information is managed and positioned well. That's a real discipline. Wow, I don't have it.
But I mean, you have discipline because you yourself are really focusing on your numbers, and maybe you've taken some of the stuff from the public sector back to your own business.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like the again, it was an incredible learning experience, right? I learned a ton about why that's done, what the value is. Now, I do believe that there is some agility to be achieved without necessarily that tightness of rigor. But let me also point out that for most of us in small business, we don't have investors and large amounts of money to play with at the same way. It is a difficult, much more scrappy game versus the resources that you can potentially have as a public company. They're just different. I know where I play well, and I've decided to play there.
Yeah, I understand. They got to know your strengths and weaknesses in that. So tell me about your younger years. You decided to start an MSP. You have a degree in cyber computer science. So
Yes.
is that what led you there, or why did you get into becoming an MSP?
It's a funny story. So I'm very proud. I have a degree in computer science. I've known I wanted to be in technology and play with computers since I was like 5. I mean, it's one of those things that I just knew, and I'm lucky for that. Not everyone knows kind of where their calling is. I wanted to play with technology, so I went and got a computer science degree, and I got it from William and Mary here in Virginia, which is a liberal arts college, right? So I didn't go to an engineering school, which is why I learned to read and write, and had to take philosophy and government and sociology and all these other classes, which I really value. And I was a developer. I was a developer consultant for a long time. Worked in the QA group on a product team. I did a bunch of consulting. I jumped over to a little startup for a while, and we were doing medical contracting. And I was there for a while, led a team of developers. We launched a cool product, right? And in 2002, which would be notable because that's a downturn, right?
Mm-hmm.
On Valentine's Day 2002, on that morning, they marched all the developers into a room and told us all that we'd lost our jobs, that they were letting
Wow.
the retirement team go, and they were keeping the leadership and the sales team. And I was shown the door, and for me, I walked away young and full of vigor for the tech, thinking, wait a second, what are they going to do with just a group of salespeople and leaders? They don't have any doers.
Yeah.
What? And then, but my next thought is, well, wait a second. If you're on the sales or leadership side, you still have your job when things go bad. I can run a company into the wall just as easily as those morons can. I should run my own company. Like, literally, that was the reasoning, right? That was the base thing. And my technical specialty at the time was I was a developer who could do infrastructure. So like I wrote a lot of web systems. We built an early e-commerce platform for a large plastics manufacturer. But what I could do was not only the front end code, but I could actually install the database and run the web server and do the network infrastructure underneath it, which was kind of unique.
Yeah.
And a rare skill for developers. Usually you're a developer or a database guy or an infrastructure person. There weren't a ton of people that could do all of it. And so I had the choice when I was deciding I was going to do my own thing. I sort of said, well, I could either build product, like I could try and build something, like go do the software side, or I could run infrastructures. And I chose infrastructure because I thought it was easier. And I'm going to let that sink in for any MSP who's laughing now going, you thought what? I thought it was easier.
Yeah.
But that was literally the idea, is that I thought that was going to be easier. And then my next flow decisions were, well, I don't want to chase this. I don't want to be chasing time. So I'm going to sell contracts for network infrastructure. And I'm going to deliver a set of services on a pre-subscribed motion. That, of course, becomes managed services, right? You can easily see how that becomes managed services. We landed our first client. That was February. Of course, I lost my job. I landed my first big client by April, and there we go, off on a managed services.
That's awesome. So I'm curious. I always like to talk on the Journey podcast because there's a lot of buzzwords in any world about kind of like the golden parachute. If you sell your company, you're set for life. That's like the ultimate. Tell us a little bit about the acquisition. Our first question would be, how did you structure your company so that it was even interesting for an acquisition, so it wasn't just you were getting out just to get out because you were so frustrated with it?
Yeah, so the story of my sale was, so actually, interestingly, I had two key people quit right about the same time. My service manager and my sort of dispatcher quit within about a month of one another. And anybody who's an MSP would know, like, well, those are linchpin jobs, right?
Yep.
Those are jobs that help keep things running. And I was re-examining what I was going to do with it, and I had this, and I was like, well, okay, kind of damaged. The business is a little damaged. I've got to figure out a way to fill those holes back in. And my aha moment was realizing that, well, wait a second, without those two spots, what I actually have are a bunch of doers, like frontline engineers, and I have a bunch of customers. That's an asset. Mm-hmm. That is something of value to an acquirer. And in fact, right now, I'm actually easier to sell and be acquired because I don't have that legacy bid. They're not, we could move these clients and these people into somebody else's system. That was my aha moment of, oh, wait a second, my weakness, I'm going to turn into a strength. I'm going to position this as, yeah, you're going to be buying the customer list and the people. So you'll get the customers and you'll get the people that can do the job, and you can impose your own will on that. Because, by the way, I'm getting out. I won't get in the way.
Yeah, and I think that's a big win. And we've learned here on the journey is never sell out of desperation, because you get less money. That's just the long and the short of it. When you're selling out of desperation, when they know that you want out, then maybe you should do a session on just how to sell your MSP. But selling out of desperation, I never see those deals go well.
No, those go badly. But I wasn't desperate. I knew
Yeah.
I knew that I could fix it if I wanted to. The other key decision was I didn't want to.
Right.
I'd been running it almost a decade at the time. Was tired of it. Was ready to do something else. Clearly, I'm a builder, not a maintainer. And at some levels, like I like building things. And so again, let's make that into an asset. Let's make a sellable set of assets. So for me, it was an asset sale. I sold the contracts and I sold the people in that they were offered jobs, right? But part of the condition of the sale was you're going to hire these people and give them a chance.
Yeah.
They get a fair shot at employment there. Anyone who wants a job should get it. Then you judge them and mentor them and work them through. I'm really proud of what I did on that front. They maintained like 80% of the revenue, like 3 and 4 years later, and there's still people working there, a decade later, that like working that were my employees.
That's fantastic.
That you can't ask for better than that. I was paid out. I was paid out early because we did cash down and a payout. That was the basic structure of it. And as I said, I took my payout money and I put it aside, and it's invested and it's working for me. And I will be delighted one day when I'm ready to stop working, because that's at work for me right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So tell me, what's one thing, you've had a couple of different business venture jobs. What's one thing in these ventures that you didn't expect to happen in your career?
Oh, I didn't think I would end up being like gabbing for a living. I really legitimately thought, like, if you ask college Dave what he thought he'd be doing, I thought he'd be coding and like building stuff. And even in my managed services days, I thought I would be like really hands-on with tech. And here I am, in what I'm doing now, and I'm literally I just talk, right? I talk and I think and I combine ideas together. And that for me has been a real surprise. I think about it a lot because I kind of think my superpower as such is my ability to take complicated technical ideas, combine them, and also explain them well. And I try and work on that a lot so that I can be better and better at that. But that if I figured out my skill, it's that.
That's really interesting. Just continue to develop those skills, and really made that transition from developer to gabber, which is probably hard for most developers that I've met. But tell me, what's the biggest challenge you're facing as a content creator? I think it's a noisy space. Everybody's creating content because everything is content, and there's a lot of junk out there. You touched on it a little bit before, but what is the biggest challenge of maybe making yours rise to the top?
So maybe I'm naive on this one, but I believe that in two things. I believe great content will rise to the top, and all you have to do is do it and make sure it gets exposure. I spend a ton of time just trying to be good at the content side. Again, I'm not trying to do everything. I try and figure out where my lane is, the topics that I'm good at, the stuff that I can add value on. And I think a lot about where I can add value and what I can do that is valuable and is good content. It is less important to me to crank out lots than I'd be proud of the stuff that I put out. But you also have to do it consistently, right?
Correct.
And so it's get the rhythm of doing that consistently. And then the second bit is you can't assume if you build it, they will come. Your job is to go out and get it in front of people. Then it's up to them to judge it, like it, and subscribe, hit the buttons and all that kind of stuff, right? My job is two-part. Good content, get it in front of people. Rinse, repeat, over and over and over again. Do those two pieces of the machine over and over and over again, and I will just trust the rest of the process.
So true. So true with anything that you do. Tell me, what's the most important lesson that you've learned over your career then? You touch on a couple of great things right there. That might be one of them.
The lesson that I was given by somebody I very much admire in the industry is a simple phrase, and it's make business decisions ruthlessly and execute them humanely. And I think about that a lot because what I want to separate out is I wanted to separate the business decision from the people. I try and make those decisions like with a vicious ruthlessness to my core as much as I can, and because you've got to make that decision. And I find the more aggressive I can be at, the better, because then I also get the opportunity to do it humanely. What I mean, like an example of that is for example, like it's okay to be really harsh on like your judgment of someone's productivity, right? And then execute that decision as humanely as possible. Give them grace and give them time and give them a fair, if you're not going to work with them anymore, give them as much time as needed, help them transition, be graceful with that as much as possible. It doesn't have, you don't have to shove them out the door. You can give them time and you can support them and you can get them to the next bit. That's the right way to do it. And so that lesson resonates for me all the time, and I think about it a lot.
So what do you think personality strength somebody needs to be able to run a company?
Patience. It's a grind. It is a grind. It is, you are getting on a machine that you've got to run every single day and grind it out. And you've got to have patience, and you're going to be eager, and you're going to want to move fast, and you're going to want to do everything. And you need to recognize that there is some patience to this. You're an overnight success in 20 years.
Right? Absolutely.
Like, and that's okay. Like, have some patience. You keep grinding at it and you will see results over time.
So what is one piece of advice you would give to somebody starting out in business today?
Know your why. Why are you doing it, and the why of the service you're offering? Why would someone else care? I ask on my show, why do we care, right? That's the tagline that I ask for all my analysis pieces. So I do news, why do we care? And but why should somebody care about what you're doing? Why does it matter? Why is it important? Why do they need it? Why are you doing it? Know your why, and everything else answers. Don't get me wrong, I'm borrowing from Simon Sinek on this, but like, he's right? Know your why and spend your time there. Everything else flows from that. So I would tell anybody that's starting out, know the why and you will do well.
So maybe you mentioned some authors, but who has been your most important professional mentor through all of this?
I want to give some honorable mentions before I
Okay.
actually name it. So I want to give two kind of honorable mentions to Alistair Forbes and Walter Scott, who I worked for at GFI. I've learned so much from them, and they invested a bunch in my career. And Walter in particular gives really good advice, and I always laugh, and I enjoy being yelled at by Walter. But career mentor actually is a man named Phil Wary. Phil found me for my first job. Found me in college, like found some of my work. He was a fellow William & Mary grad, found my work. I'd been doing websites and had a whole crazy thing going on when I was a senior in college. Found my work there, hired me for my first job, mentored me through multiple jobs, including working with me during my MSP. Phil sadly had a heart attack and passed a few years ago. But I hear Phil's voice all the time. And he was a great mentor along the way. He was a little bit further along in his career, willing to invest his time and talents and thoughtfulness to give me guidance and harsh realities when I needed it. And for me, he was definitely the mentor that helped me along the way.
That's so good. Good to have a mentor there. It's impossible for us to get to where we're going without somebody cheering us on and
Oh,
helping
and
us to pick us
you
back
need
up.
people you need people that'll tell it like it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like that will tell you, tell you what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, will
Mm-hmm.
give you flat out honest opinion, assess your situation. You need that kind of kitchen table group of advisors that gives you a mentor is great. You can have more than one, but you need people that will give you straight advice, and that's so powerful.
So, what's one lesson that you've learned through professional and personal that you think that everybody should learn at some point in their life? Just like that, if you're talking to your kid, like you need to learn this, kid. Like, what should we learn?
Focus, 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 focus. I am a shiny objects person. I'm totally a shiny objects person. I'm
I couldn't
distracted.
tell.
Yeah, I go off on rants. I have ideas. I'm crazy. And it's focus, 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 focus. The more that I focus, the better I do. The more I wander around and can't figure out the why, the less I do. So it's always about focus.
So, what's one thing about what you do? You talk specifically to MSPs. So, what's your stick that you have that almost no other MSP agrees with you about?
So I will say with a smile, I try and have several. Like at my actual job, like because I look at what I'm doing and I say I'm really trying to challenge ideas a little bit and make people ask the why of why they're doing it. I've got two. I'll give you the one that is top of mind. I think MSPs are missing the boat on e-commerce
Mm.
and doing. I've done tons of material on this, and I think they're missing the boat. They tell me how amazing and intricate and how they have to talk to their customer all the time and everything is all specialized. It's like, but I go to your website and there's so little information and no way to engage with you. I can get a new bank, I can get a new lawyer, I can get a new set of insurance, I can go buy a multi-million dollar house, I can buy a car, I can educate myself on like all other industries. But your IT services are so special that they can't be taught online. No. I just laugh and go like it's just missing the boat on all of this stuff. And by the way, I'm not saying throw 5,000 SKUs into an online store and try and be Amazon. But if your customers can't engage with you and buy things from you electronically, your best sales force is off on the beach somewhere. Like, why wouldn't you want your web properties to be constantly selling, marketing, and engaging for you online? Why wouldn't you want that sales engine? Because you're a special flower and you have to meet with every single one of these? I go to your website. I'm interested in learning more about IT services. And the only way to get in touch with you is an old school form or call you. What? It's 2022. I can have food brought to my house in a second. I can get myself a new lawyer. I can do all of these kinds of crazy things like just instantly. But your services, I can't. I don't buy it.
Hmm. That's really interesting. Food for thought for the MSP space, really for anybody in business. Is why can't you buy it online? So tell us, what is an underrated tool that you couldn't do your job without?
So for me, it's time management. I've got like I kind of laugh and go, Calendly is like my best tool because I make sure, back to exactly what I said, by the way, like make sure people can find you and engage. There's Calendly links like directly on my websites, the different places that bring people in depending on what I need them to do, what I want them to do. And if they need time to talk something out, it's simple to get on my calendar. But I also control it. It's not that I give wide swaths of my entire calendar. I know that, people that want to talk to me about doing consulting calls, they have windows of opportunity that they can, by the way, just swipe their credit card and engage with me from one of my websites. You want to talk to me about advertising on the site? There's another path that brings them through electronically. Oh, and then they've got questions they want to get on my calendar. Cool, goes onto my calendar automatically. They can also buy online, by the way. Or, you every email, like you want to talk to me, you want to get an engagement, great, there's a link to do that automatically. And I've made it easy for people to get in touch with me, get on my calendar, do what they want, but I also completely control it. It's only the times that I want to make available. So time management for me is just because it's the one resource that is not renewable. I can't get more time back. So if I'm really good at managing it, it makes such a big difference for me.
So true, so true. But I know you already said you're a shiny objects kind of guy. So my one of my questions here is, what's your next business you're gonna start?
Well, so in a way so I love this one. I'm having so much fun doing this one that I'm barely like, but when I thought about this question, because you did give me this one beforehand, I sort of put a little bit of like, well, assuming money was no real object to it and I could have a little bit of fun, I would open a barcade in a second. Like an old, like beer, good pizza, and old school video games. That sounds like an amazing bit.
Time to cash out to retirement.
Yeah, it's I think I could make a run on that one. I think it would be great fun. There isn't really one in the Northern Virginia, DC area, and I just look and go, with as much technical people as are in this area, it feels like such a win. I would totally do that.
That would be a lot of fun. So is there any other occupation you want to try? Like besides the barcade business?
There is, because they're different questions, right? Like tackle a business versus an occupation. I'd love to be a college professor, actually. I would love the opportunity to engage with young people over time and kind of go on an educational journey together and teach. I think that would be so rewarding. I would love to be a college professor.
That could be a lot of fun, and maybe an opportunity will come along for that. Lots of educational options there in the DC area. So.
Yeah, there's a couple of good schools here, and I laugh at them. If you're listening and can hook me up, like I would love to teach a class, or like I think it would be so much fun.
With the internet, you can teach anywhere these days. So.
Also true.
Also true. So, Dave, I really appreciate you being on the Journey podcast today. I got a couple of rapid fire questions here at the end. I know you read a lot. What are 3 books you recommend to the audience?
I recommend The Go-Giver. It's Bob Burg's book. I think you should read it and internalize that. I think Business Model Generation, which is a workbook, but it walks you through different business models and how they work, is amazing. And my third would be Purple Cow. It's a classic for a reason.
It's an awesome book. Yeah.
Yep.
It's just a little one too. So
yep.
That's one of my top books. Okay. If I'm starting a business today, what would be one word of wisdom you would give me?
I think I've given it, but it's going to be focus.
Focus. Well, I've asked you a lot of questions today, Dave. Are there any questions you wish I would have asked you that I didn't ask you?
That's a super fun question because I can go all kinds of interesting ways. And in a way, the one I think you didn't ask me about that I'm going to throw out there is tell me about like your friends and what you do outside.
Yeah.
And here's why I think it's an important question. Then I'll give you my answer. So I'm in my mid 40s, right? And I think a lot about that the mental state. And I talked a little bit about like understanding people outside the context of work. Men in our 40s are oftentimes have less of a friendship connection and support system outside of like either just work or their spouse. And in fact, there's a lot of research showing about like sort of how difficult it is to make friends at that level, but how important those venues and spaces are for your mental health and for your kind of, for all of to make life fulfilling. Which is why I think about that a lot. And it's also the fact that because I'm incredibly lucky / invested a lot in and did a lot too. All the men that stood up for me 19 years ago when I got married, I am friends with and talk to every week, if not daily. Because we stay in touch and we have like a whole Slack channel, and they're all my buddies from college. Most live in the area, but not everybody. And we've all made intentional investments in those relationships. And I could not treasure it more. And like, I think it's kind of a bit of a good measurement of someone's mental health, how they talk about like their relationships outside of work or even just their spouse, right? Like, are they well connected? And you didn't ask me about that one, and so I brought up the like why it's important to me, and also the like I have this incredible network of friends, and I talked about my like advisor, that you need an advisory table. Oh, those are the guys too that will tell me like you're full of it. That's a crazy idea. I can't believe you're trying that. They give me really honest advice on stuff, and I think that's really valuable too.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And I'll put a plug for one of our other episodes with Jim Young, who really dives deep into that subject, not only in the episode but in his new book, which I told him I would plug on a couple of podcasts. I just think it's so important for not only burnout in your career, but just having good, deep relationships with men around you. And we've had a lot of leaders on the journey talk about that specifically for men. And then we've had some women on here explain that as well, and the work that they're doing in that area as well. Yeah. So definitely some great guests that we've had on there, but I would recommend the audience on that topic. Dive a little deeper with Jim Young on that in his new book from one of our earlier episodes in 22. So it was a great one, and Jim's a great thought leader about that on LinkedIn. Dave, thanks so much for joining us on the Journey podcast. Tell the audience how they can get in touch with you, how they can learn about you. You have a couple of things going on with your website and the podcast, and it's a lot of fun and engaging. And tell them a little bit more about you and how they can reach you.
Yeah, I try and make it easy. So all my resources are at businessof.tech. Just go to that website. There's a big blue button where you can subscribe to the podcast however you like to get that. So that's either on whatever podcast you like, the YouTube channel. There's written versions on the website there. Like, those are the ways to get in touch with me. There's also big contact me. You can get on my calendar. All the resources again at businessof.tech. Really, I love hearing from listeners. I really appreciate the the subscribes and the listens, but even more so, I like hearing from listeners saying like, yeah, you're right, or by the way, you're wrong, because I'm out here to pose ideas for the discussion of the idea and the analysis, less than being right. Don't get me wrong, I like being right sometimes, but it's more about the discussion and the analysis, because I don't think there's one way to solve problems.
So true. I love Dave's content. I was watching Dave before we got connected through the podcast here on the Journey. I don't always agree with him, and I usually throw it in the comments because we get to have that little bit of banter back and forth, but always some great content. Gives me things to think about and work through and learn about. So go check out his website, thebusinessof.tech. Learn more about Dave, and there's a lot there that you can learn, not only as an MSP, but I think there's a lot of things that can be connected to other types of businesses. Thanks, Dave, for being a part of the journey today. This was great. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me. This has been great fun.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you.